Welcome back, guys, to the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve, where last episode, with the trial continuing to find out the identity of the Reaper, we took testimony from Klint Van Zieks about the Reaper and the Assassin Exchange, countering his statement about there being no link between him, John H. Wilson, and Gregson with the autopsy report of his brother. This led to Kazuma revealing that he had talked to Gregson about the evidence found in this autopsy, and that it had been falsified due to no concrete evidence being found to prosecute Genshin Asugi as the Professor, and this in turn led to Van Zieks realizing the identity of the Reaper. After accusing Mel Strongheart of being the Reaper, the judge of this trial attempted to shut things down, saying there was no way to prove anything was amiss with the autopsy. However, we pointed out that Yujin Mikotoba was the one who wrote the report itself, as Strongheart continued his escape attempt. The Sholmes arrived to shut it down, appealing to the judiciary in the stand to pressure the Chief Justice to continue the trial, as we now attempt to bring the Reaper's reign to an end. So, witness, please state your name and occupation for the court. Witnesses, by the look of it, we got 3 people on the stand, according to the start. Yujin Mikotoba, lecturer in forensic medicine at the Imperial Yume University in Tokyo, Japan. And Professor Mikotoba, the young lady beside you is... this is Dr. Maria Gorey, Scotland Yard's practicing coroner, the daughter of Dr. Saive, I understand. Yes, Dr. Saive. I'm afraid I can't tell you why she's here. She just appeared. You summon this strange Japanese man as a witness to that autopsy. But you don't summon Mama. That makes no sense. She was there too. That's about the size of it. I've had her eyes boring into the side of my cheek constantly whilst I was in the antechamber too. Poor man. The idea of it's making me shudder. Revelations about Dr. Saive that came to light some days ago defiled the reputation of the entire judiciary. She was therefore deemed unfit to appear as a witness in today's proceedings. The Ministry of Justice's decision on that is final. Well, we wouldn't want any more perjury to be committed, would we? The Ministry of Justice. Some questionable strings are being pulled, I think. I remember you, Dr. Mikotoba, but I certainly never expected to be meeting you under these circumstances. Yes, it's been a long while, Lord Strongheart. The prosecution understands that you were a visiting student of forensic science in London until 10 years ago. That's right. I studied under Dr. Wilson at St. Sinners. So you were present at the autopsy of my brother, Lord Klint Van Zieks? I was, yes. I assisted Dr. Wilson with the entire procedure. Mama is far more skilled than any Japanese man. Well, Dr. Wilson asked me to be his primary assistant on that occasion. And this autopsy report was actually penned by you, I believe. Yes, I noted all the doctor's findings, and when we were done, he read through the document and signed it. Poor Mama. As secondary assistant, she wouldn't have had such a good view of all the innards. So, Professor, do you remember Inspector Gregson? Yes, of course. If it wasn't for his insistence, Lord Van Zieks' autopsy would never have happened. But he was absolutely convinced that it would reveal decisive evidence against Genshin, you see. So Lord Strongheart had to entreat the nobility to allow it to take place. Do correct me if I'm wrong, my lord. It was as a result of that autopsy that a mass murderer was apprehended and justice was done. But Gregson admitted it before he was killed. He admitted that the results of the autopsy were fabricated. You were there at the time, so you must testify. You have an obligation to tell the truth about what really went on. Absolutely. That's precisely why I'm here. And that's why I'm here too. Very well then. You will give your formal testimony now, witness. But before you begin, a word of warning. Oh? You will state truthfully and accurately what you saw and what you heard at the time. I wouldn't dream of doing otherwise, my lord. The moment your testimony verges on supposition, I will expel you from my courtroom. Remember that. That requires a lot of tightrope walking, but I'm sure Mr. Mikotoba can do it. The Autopsy of Klint Van Zieks. From my own observations, I couldn't say there was any indication of the autopsy results having been fabricated. Death resulted from a wound made by a Western-style sword transfixing the heart. That I found a little strange. There were no other signs of internal injury, nothing questionable at all. It was just that beautiful but dangerous piece of evidence removed from the man's stomach. Presumed to have been swallowed by the victim as a way of posthumously identifying his assailant. Okay. No indication. Nothing to suggest fabrication. Professor Mikotoba, are you certain about that? Well, nothing that I could positively identify as such, much less swear to in testimony. Ah! Well, that cleared things up nicely. The only fabrication here, Asugi, has come from you. What? You claim the inspector confessed just before his death. But that is the fabrication. No, he freely acknowledges it. I swear he did. Freely, the tip of a sword at his throat. The man was clearly at his wit's end. The court will give no credence to this confession that was uttered in obvious desperation. Quite simply, there was nothing questionable about the investigation of Lord Klint Van Zieks' death. And with this testimony, we have, without question, uncovered the whole truth of the matter. If I may, my lord. There was most certainly something questionable about it, and the whole truth does rather elude us, I feel. I beg your pardon? Well, you're obviously aware of the facts of the case. All four of the professor's previous victims died when an enormous beast was set upon them that ripped out their throats. Oh, such horrifying crimes! But curiously, the killer's last victim, Lord Klint Van Zieks, suffered a different fate. Yes, you're right. He was stabbed through the heart with a sword. That's enough. I believe I warned you about this, witness. I promised to curtail your testimony as soon as it entered the realms of supposition or speculation. Very well, my lord. In that case, the defense will pursue a conclusion to this during the cross-examination. What? I have the right to cross-examine every witness after testimony. And I fully intend to exercise that right. Ryunosuke, I'm afraid that even the presiding judge has no authority to contravene the letter of the law. As I'm sure every member of the judiciary present in the gallery would agree. Very well, you may begin, counsel. However, the moment your argument strays from the established facts, I will not hesitate to bring the cross-examination to an end. Proceed with caution. Yes, my lord. Here we go. The Autopsy of Klint Van Zieks. From my own observations, I couldn't say there was any indication of the autopsy results having been fabricated.
Hold it!
You couldn't say? No, sadly not. Then you couldn't say there wasn't any indication either, could you? No, true, I couldn't. I was at Dr. Wilson's side as he performed the procedure, recording what he did. But at times, of course, he instructed me to fetch implements and such like. Whilst I was away from the operating table, obviously I could have missed something. And at those times, what was the secondary assistant doing? Following this Japanese man's orders to adjust the lighting or pass him implements. But that doesn't mean Mama wasn't a vital part of the team. Quite, yes. So would you kindly refrain from staring at my cheek like that? Professor Mikotoba, think. Was there nothing at all that seemed out of place to you? Well, yes, there was, as a matter of fact. Death resulted from a wound made by a Western-style sword transfixing the heart. That I found a little strange.
Hold it!
In all the previous 4 killings attributed to the professor, the victims were killed by an enormous dog, I believe. their throats were, well, mauled?
Correct, and yet Lord Van Zieks was stabbed.
Do you mean to say you think Lord Klint Van Zieks may not in fact have been one of the Professor's victims?
There is no basis on which to doubt the findings of the investigations carried out at the time.
But
Genshin Asuki confessed to all of his crimes upon his arrest. He admitted to having taken the lives of all 5 members of the aristocracy. Yet the piece that was used to carry out the killings was never identified. No evidence was found to suggest that Genshin had ever kept a dog. A true hound of hell.
there were no other signs of internal injury, nothing questionable at all.
Hold it!
But, you weren't actually present at the autopsy yourself, were you, Dr. Gorey? Does that matter? Well, I just wonder how useful your testimony can be in that case, really. Obviously, her testimony is going to be the useful one, right? I mean, it would be different if your mother, Dr. Sive, were in the stand, but... I've read all the paperwork about the case, and Mum has told me the story countless times. The statement I just made is exactly what's written in the autopsy report.
I did confirm that myself at the time, it's true. Besides the stab wound, there were no other signs of internal trauma.
I see. Mama told me all about it. Oh? She said there was nothing of note internally. But they did find an amazing piece of evidence. Something unbelievable.
Unbelievable? What do you mean?
Come on, Dr. Gorey. What was it? That's their next statement. It was just that beautiful but dangerous piece of evidence removed from the man's stomach.
Hold it!
What exactly was it, though? What does beautiful but dangerous mean? Well, it was sparkly and round, with a hole, as if it might slip over a finger, perhaps.
It was a ring, belonging to Genshin Asuki. But my father's ring was inside the victim's stomach. At the time, Genshin wore a large ring on the digitus quartus of his left hand, the fourth or ring finger. I had understood it was some sort of keepsake. When my father left Japan for London 16 years ago, I was 8 years old. But I remember that ring.
You do?
My father's possessions were sent to our family home in Japan after his death, but the ring wasn't among them. Obviously not. It was a key piece of evidence. It remains under lock and key in the stores at Scotland Yard to this day. After the autopsy, Genshin was summoned by the police to check for the presence of his ring. It wasn't on his hand, of course. Moreover, there were deep abrasions on his finger where it had been pulled off. They arrested the man there and then, right before my eyes. How could they?
I brought the ring along with me today. Whoa! What? What? Here it is, a bit dusty from years in the stores.
Good gracious, yes, that's it. I haven't seen that in 10 long years. And that was found inside the victim's stomach. Yes, I'm afraid so.
You hesitated there, Professor Mikotoba. Should we read something into that?
Well, it's just that thinking back now, I didn't actually witness the moment it was extracted from the victim's body.
Oh my, really?
At that precise moment, Dr. Wilson had asked me to fetch him a new scalpel, you see. Dr. Gorey, removal of historic evidence from the stores requires my consent, does it not? However it came to be here, the court cannot deny that this is crucial evidence for today's proceedings. Very well, you may submit it.
Okay, the claws clasping the gem looks sharp enough to cause a very nasty scratch. Yes, they do. How did it get down there, after all?
That looks like hard to swallow.
It's not the sort of ring normally seen in Japan. They almost look like claws protecting that jewel. We must examine it very carefully, Mr. Naruhodo. Very carefully indeed.
On it. These fat claws are doing a good job of protecting the equally fat gemstone in the middle of this ring. Yes, if you were clumsy, you could give yourself a rather nasty cut on them, I should think. Ow! Now my finger's bleeding. The claws really are sharp. Oh my, that was very quick clumsiness, Miss Naruto, even for you. Ugh, it would make such a dangerous ring. You couldn't swallow it without doing yourself some fairly serious damage, surely. A sticky mochi bun of about that size would go down much better, with some red bean paste in the middle. Someone as clumsy as me would probably manage to choke on it somehow. Anything else to examine here? Mainly just the clawed part. There would be a really hard swallow. Yeah, this would be monstrous to swallow. You'd notice massive amounts of damage along, like, the esophagus, etc. Is the esophagus, Rowan? Pretty sure. To trachea. Esophagus. Whatever! I'm not a science! I'm just a guy who's trying to play this, which needs science. Presumed to have been swallowed by the victim as a way of posthumously identifying his assailant. Yes, looks a bit hard to swallow, to be perfectly honest. And that was a decisive piece of evidence that led to Genshin Asugi's arrest. Correct. After further investigations by Scotland Yard, the man admitted to his crimes. That's a lie. My father was no killer. Klint Van Zieks, it was you. You twisted the truth to suit your purposes. Your hatred of me doesn't change the facts that were established 10 years ago. My brother, Klint, had closed in on the professor. In the end, he exposed the man and put a stop to his lethal rampage. In the way only a man of my brother's caliber could. That's everything, is it? Poor father. He looked so troubled. Perhaps because 10 years ago, something happened that's been weighing on his mind. Oh, I couldn't say were his words. That phrasing was very deliberate, I'm sure. I wonder if he's had his suspicions all these years. If that's the case, we need to use this cross-examination to prove what really happened and remove any trace of doubt. If we could establish that Kazuma-sama's claim of fabricated evidence was true. We can't shy away from this now. Even if what we might uncover could lead to total calamity. Don't worry, Mr. Naruto. I'll be right beside you. Whatever may happen. Well, I'm assuming we're probably presenting this ring because it's the fabricated evidence. Death result from a wound made by Western-style sword transfixing the heart. That's strange. No other signs of internal injury. Nothing questionable at all. This is our statement. Because the fact that that ring is super sharp has been called up multiple times, and if they did an autopsy, they would notice that all the way down it would have got snagged, caught, cut. The mouth would be cut up. Nothing else questionable apart from it was in the stomach. How did they get it there then? Actually, of course it's like not in the body, but still. How did this pass? God, can you imagine trying to pass that ring?
Objection!
Correct. The court has heard that the ring was extracted from the victim's stomach, but you didn't actually see it being removed, did you, Professor Mikotoba? That's right, as I said in my testimony before. At that moment, I was fetching a replacement scalpel that Dr. Wilson had requested. In other words, you can neither confirm nor deny whether this ring, in fact, really came from the victim's stomach or not. What are you suggesting, counsel? That the ring was never in the victim's stomach to begin with. It's entirely feasible that Dr. Wilson fabricated that detail about the autopsy. What are you saying? That Dr. Wilson was in possession of the ring in advance after it was somehow stolen from Mr. Asugi. And he produced it during the procedure, pretending to have found it there and then in the the victim's stomach.
Objection!
Witness? No, that'd be wrong. Supposition at best. What possible evidence do you have to support such a rash claim? This evidence, right here. That's the autopsy report. It's explicit in that report, counsel. Other than the ring, nothing unusual was noted internally. so I'm not sure how you intend to prove your point.
You've already done it for me, my lord.
The lack of internal injury says it all. What? To swallow a ring of this size would require considerable effort and determination. And in addition to its size, there are the sharp claws around the gemstone to contend with. My brother was a determined man, and on the brink of death even more so, I'm sure. He would have stopped at nothing to ensure that evil killer was brought to justice. But if he really had swallowed that enormous ring, it's inconceivable that no traces of its passage down his throat would have remained as internal trauma. No! And they've arrived at the sticking point. That's precisely why I had my doubts about the findings myself 10 years ago. Then why didn't you say something at the time? I did. I still remember the conversation I had with Dr. Wilson in the laboratory that day. Look at this! Now this is a very curious thing to find in a man's stomach, wouldn't you say? But isn't that rather peculiar, Dr. Wilson? What's that now, Mikotoba? Well, if he swallowed a ring of that size with those sharp metal claws that it has, surely you'd expect to see damage to the throat and esophagus. Torn mucous membranes at the very least. Dr. Mikotoba, may I remind you that I have vastly more experience than you. I'm terribly sorry. I can think of plenty of ways to explain why no injuries would be seen. No, let's say this. The victim would appear to have ingested the item as evidence to identify his assailant. Go ahead, write it down. Does anyone not feel bad about him getting murdered now? I don't know, a little bit. So I was right. Dr. Wilson deliberately fabricated the results of the autopsy to implicate my father. I'm disappointed, Counsel. That argument is nothing more than speculation. What? Dr. Wilson was Britain's leading authority on forensic science and autopsy work. There was no scientific basis on which to doubt the man's expert opinion. Pardon the interruption, my lord, but damage to the mucous membranes of the throat is easily identified even in living subjects. Using a device called an endoscope, recently demonstrated in practical use in France. I want one. The government can pay. I don't think so. And Dr. Gorey, rest assured that your removal of evidence from the stores without permission will not go unpunished. We open up the dead to find the truth. I beg your pardon? But Mama, she chose to stitch her corpses up, with all her secrets inside. That's wrong. Dr. Gorey, it's looking as though she's chosen to walk a different path to her mama. Yes, the ring. What about the ring? I've just remembered something. An earlier incident. What incident? The one I recounted to you before, about a memory I have of Genshin Asugi saving my life. What? My father saved your life? It was 10 years ago, on a foggy night. Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. All of a sudden... Don't make a peep, you're coming with us! All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves. The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He'd shielded me. It was on the ring finger of his left hand that he used to wear that ring. Are you saying... I've always believed those thugs were after me. But now, I'm starting to question if perhaps I wasn't the intended target after all. Wait, But Genshin was arrested 2 days after that attack. And in that short interval, the decisive evidence needed to indict him was miraculously found. You mean the ring was stolen from him? You think that's what those thugs were after that night?
Objection!
You pathetic coward! You expect me to believe that you weren't involved? What do you mean by that? It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who took it. You stole my father's ring. You set the whole thing up so you could paint him as a mass murderer and have him arrested. Kazuma. Open your eyes. Ryunosuke. You must know deep down. The truth can be completely obscured even when your judgment is only slightly clouded. But at the moment, you seem to be floundering through a dense fog. Is that why you were so insistent I should be present in this trial? To see you like this? Well, it's an amusing spectacle. What a grandiose expression on your face, as if you were Lady Justice herself. It seems you've thoroughly convinced yourself of this alleged fabrication of the autopsy results. So much so that you're apparently blind to the blatant contradiction that would be born out of it. What? Though it's extremely hard to believe, let us imagine that there was some misconduct during the autopsy. If that were the case, why would Asugi not have disputed the findings in his trial? Oh. In the closed court hearing 10 years ago, the defendant never once denied the claims against him. Isn't that right, Lord Van Zieks? Yes, that is indeed correct. Upon hearing the verdict of guilty, he merely closed his eyes, quietly accepting the judgment. The actions of a man who has accepted responsibility for his deeds and is resigned to his fate. But then... Oh my, that is very strange. If Mr. Asugi did nothing to oppose the charges against him, then... that would surely mean there was no fabricated evidence. An obvious conclusion at which you should have arrived many minutes ago, Prosecutor Asugi. Your twisted loyalty and clouded judgment are hampering your ability for logical thought. Ah! Genshin Asugi's silence at his hearing could only mean one thing. There was no fabrication of evidence during the autopsy of his final victim 10 years ago. Ah! But if that autopsy was all above board, there would be nothing to stop Lord Strongheart bringing this trial to an immediate conclusion.
Objection!
Thank you, Ryunosuke. If it wasn't for your frank words just now, this trial may very well have ended prematurely. Kazuma! What's this latest absurdity, Counsel? My lord, your reasoning is perfectly sound, but for one giant hole. I beg your pardon? You claim my father's silence was due to the fact that there was no fabricated evidence, but there's another possible explanation. You've overlooked the possibility that he had a reason for maintaining that silence.
Objection!
Silence that would lead to him being convicted and sent to his death. If the autopsy results were an invention, there's no conceivable reason why the man wouldn't have protested.
Objection!
Oh, those results were an invention, all right? There's no question of that. Or are you forgetting the two people with a connection to that autopsy have been assassinated? If I force the grievances I feel from my mind, I start to see you in a very different light. I think perhaps it's you who's been living in delusion these 10 years. Me? Kazuma-sama has created one last chance for us here, Mr. Naruhodo. If we can only show there was a reason for his father's silence in his trial. A reason why the man would have said nothing, even though he was innocent. Could he have been part of some negotiation, perhaps? Enough rhetoric. The court must be shown evidence. What proof do you have that could possibly explain Asugi's silence in court? I have something? I guess I do. So again, we'll narrow down our evidence to that period of time. The trial, the events around it. So we don't want it. None of this matters. This is 10 years ago. So I should check that. Actually, we're not carrying a lot of stuff. I mean, there was this, but I don't think that's a thing either. Oh, we actually, I mean, you got the Asugi papers. So was either, like, the Asugi papers maybe trying to get something over to him? And that would be forfeit if he didn't do it, so there was some kind of deal made. Since autopsy report that we've seen. Recent scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring fingers of the right hand, but no document in corresponding ink was found. That's got to come up at some point, right? Okay, and then the ring. That's actually a very limited amount of evidence we've got. Is this notice of dismissal anything relevant? Chief Warder Daily Vigil was relieved of his post with immediate effect for having violated Clause 132 of Her Majesty's Code of Content for Prisoners. All rights of redundancy pay and other financial benefits are fully revoked. The reason for dismissal was aiding and abetting the escape from this prison of convict just prior to his execution. Details of this escape are still being investigated. Full cooperation with inquiries will be expected. Indications are that the jailbreak plot was conceived prior to the convict's incarceration. It is believed that the convict engaged in some form of negotiation with prison staff in order to secure assistance. All disclosure of information regarding these negotiations will be demanded. Did he have to keep quiet to avoid certain things happening? Regarding this? It's interesting. We've only really... no, actually, I'm leaning towards this. Yes. We've only used this to say to Mr. Vigil that he was sacked. But this is 3 pages of sacking. We've not, like, used anything here. So it could be his silence to stop the people that were working with him being compromised too. Silence to make sure that you got the stuff. Other reasons? I was just wondering, there's a stamp there. That's red ink, isn't it? Trying to link it all together now is a bit of a thing. So I'm thinking I'm presenting that. However, I have noticed the time is literally at the end of an episode. So I'm going to just choose to lock myself into something and present it at the start of next episode. Recent scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring fingers of the right hand. No documenting corresponding ink was found. Could it be the stamp? So that was on the 31st of May, between 9 PM and midnight. Well, that'd be afterwards, wouldn't it? But I think I'm going to present this. That was way earlier. I'm wondering if he kept quiet to stop anyone else going down for him. But we're going down now to another episode next time of Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve. I've locked in my choice. We'll take a penalty or not. It's either this or the Asugi papers, so I'm assuming it's one of those two. We've narrowed it down. Now it's time to find out 50-50, are we right? Tune in next time to find out. I'll see you guys then for more. Bye-bye.